Ladies and gentlemen, what if I told you that everything you think love is might be wrong, that the person you're pouring your heart into, the relationship you're fighting for, could be the very thing holding you back from your purpose, your peace, and your potential? Too often, we invest our time, energy, and soul into someone who's emotionally unavailable, inconsistent, or simply not aligned with the future we envision. And the most painful part, we don't see it until it's too late. You don't realize how much you're shrinking, compromising, and waiting until the years have passed and you're left wondering how you lost yourself in the process. The first and most crucial key to avoiding 10 wasted years with the wrong person is understanding this. Consistency is clarity. When someone genuinely wants you, you don't have to keep decoding mixed signals, justifying their behavior, or convincing yourself that maybe they'll change. You won't feel anxious after every conversation or confused about where you stand. In fact, love should feel like home, not a puzzle, and yet we stay. Why? Because we confuse emotional intensity with emotional safety. The highs feel so high, the lows so low, it's addictive, but guess what? That emotional roller coaster isn't passion. It's a trauma bond. It's your nervous system reacting to someone who triggers your fears, not your future. You can lose years waiting for someone to be ready. You might wait for them to call you the one, wait for them to heal, wait for them to see your worth, but someone who is meant for you doesn't need convincing. They don't delay love, they show up consistently. Emotionally, honestly, you don't have to analyze their texts like it's a secret code. You don't have to sit with your phone on loud, heart racing, hoping they'll choose you today. Love doesn't feel like being chosen over and over again. It feels like being safe to be yourself. So ask yourself, are you chasing their potential, or are you honoring your own? Are you staying because of their words or their actions? Because people can say they love you and still hurt you. They can make promises in the night and break them by morning. But someone who's right for you will make it clear in their patterns, not their promises. And here's the hard truth. The longer you stay with someone who can't meet you emotionally, the more numb you become to the fact that you're settling. You normalize neglect. You start calling it patience. You convince yourself that someday things will align, but someday is not a plan, and time does not heal what someone keeps breaking. If you feel anxious more than you feel loved, uncertain more than you feel seen, it's not love. If you constantly question your worth, walk on eggshells, or feel like you're never enough, it's not love. It's survival mode disguised as connection, and your heart deserves more than that. The person you choose will shape your peace, your confidence, your energy, your growth. So if you're still wondering whether to stay, ask yourself one thing: are you thriving, or are you just surviving in someone else's silence? Have you ever found yourself holding on to someone just because of how long you've been with them? Because the idea of starting over feels more terrifying than the pain you're already enduring. That's not love. That's fear wearing a mask. One of the biggest traps people fall into, and the second key that could save you from wasting a decade on the wrong person, is this: stop confusing shared history with shared destiny. Just because you've spent years with someone doesn't mean you're meant to spend your life with them. Time spent is not a reason to keep spending more. Longevity does not equal compatibility. It just means you've been surviving together, not necessarily growing together. Here's the hook. You might be so afraid to let go of what you've built that you never stop to ask if it's even the kind of life you want to live. You're clinging to memories like they're proof that the relationship still has value. But memories don't build futures. They only echo the past, and in that echo you might be drowning. You keep telling yourself, we've been through so much together. But what if most of that was pain, disappointment, or emotional confusion? Are you honoring love, or are you avoiding loss? The problem is, we often fall in love with someone's potential. We get attached to the idea of who they could become, the fantasy version we've created in our minds. We see flashes of greatness, moments of connection, times when they almost became the person we needed, and we hold onto those glimpses like lifelines. but potential is not a promise. And when someone repeatedly shows you they're not capable of growing with you, not committed to healing, not consistent in showing up, it doesn't matter how long you've been hoping. Hoping doesn't equal having. History doesn't guarantee a future. Sometimes the years you've shared with someone were simply lessons, not a life sentence. They taught you your patterns, your wounds, your strength. They forced you to see what you truly need, even if they never gave it to you. That doesn't mean the relationship was a waste. It means it was a teacher. But once you've learned the lesson, you have to stop rereading the same chapter hoping it ends differently. You might tell yourself, but we've come so far. Yes, but at what cost? How much of yourself did you lose trying to keep them? How many times did you lower your standards just to keep the peace? How often did you silence your needs just to avoid conflict? If the relationship only works when you stop being yourself, it doesn't work. Staying in something just because of the years behind you is like refusing to take off shoes that no longer fit. Just because you've walked a long way in them, the blisters don't lie, the pain doesn't fade. You deserve a future that feels light, not one that weighs you down in nostalgia. And here's the final gut punch. If you weren't already in it, knowing everything you know now, would you choose it today? Would you fight this hard for this kind of love if it was offered to you fresh, with no history attached? Or are you just afraid to admit it's over, because letting go feels like failure? What if the biggest red flag isn't how they treat you when they're happy, but how they behave when they're angry, disappointed, or not getting their way? The third key that could save you from wasting years of your life on the wrong person is understanding this. Pay attention to how someone handles conflict, not just connection. Anyone can be sweet when things are easy. Anyone can make you feel loved on a good day, but how do they show up on the hard days? How do they react when you express a boundary, speak your truth, or say no? That's where the real version of them lives. That's where the mask slips, and the truth begins. People reveal their emotional maturity not in moments of pleasure, but in moments of pressure. Watch how they fight. Do they listen, or do they deflect, dismiss, or demean you? Do they take responsibility, or do they manipulate the narrative to make everything your fault? Do they try to resolve the issue, or do they punish you with silence, withdrawal, or guilt? Because a person who can't regulate their emotions in conflict will never create a safe space for yours. You'll always feel like you're tiptoeing around their reactions, walking on eggshells just to avoid setting them off. That's not love. That's emotional instability. The hook is this. Most people ignore red flags during conflict because they're addicted to the makeup phase. The apologies, the promises, the emotional highs that follow emotional lows. But that cycle isn't romantic, it's toxic. Love should never feel like a war zone followed by temporary peace treaties. If every disagreement turns into a dramatic blow-up, where you feel small, unheard, or even scared, that's not a rough patch, it's a pattern. And patterns don't lie. Conflict is inevitable. Disagreements will happen in every relationship. But the difference between healthy love and harmful attachment is how those moments are handled. A healthy partner seeks resolution, not revenge. They want to understand, not win. They may be hurt, frustrated, or confused, but they won't use those emotions as weapons. They won't call you names, stonewall you, or threaten the relationship as a way to gain power. Because when someone truly loves you, they care about the relationship, even when they're upset. They don't let anger override respect. Now ask yourself, how many times have you been blamed for simply having feelings? How often have your concerns been labeled as too sensitive, too emotional, or too much? That's not a sign you need to tone yourself down. It's a sign they lack the tools to meet you in emotional maturity. And the longer you stay, the more you internalize the idea that you're the problem. But love isn't about shrinking yourself to keep the peace, it's about growing together, even through discomfort. Conflict should lead to understanding, not confusion. It should strengthen the bond, not threaten it. If every disagreement makes you feel like you're about to lose the relationship, you're not in a partnership, you're in survival mode. If you have to choose between your voice and their, what if the love you're fighting for is based more on potential than reality? What if the person you're holding on to only occasionally shows you who they could be, but never consistently lives it? The fourth key to saving yourself from wasting 10 years on the wrong person is this: don't fall in love with who someone could be. Fall in love with who they are right now. The version standing in front of you today, not the one you're hoping might show up tomorrow. Because hope can be beautiful, but when it blinds you to reality, it becomes a trap disguised as loyalty. Here's the hook: most people don't stay because they're happy. They stay because they remember being happy once, and they keep trying to get back to that version. Maybe they were kind at the beginning. Maybe they listened. Maybe they lit up when they saw you. But now it's excuses, it's patterns. It's just give me time, or I'll change. You're stuck in a loop of almosts, almost healed, almost committed, almost emotionally available. And you keep waiting because you've seen glimpses, but glimpses are not consistency. A spark is not a fire. A moment is not a lifestyle. You cannot build a future on fantasies. Yet so many of us hold on because we think love is supposed to be patient, forgiving, enduring. And yes, love requires effort, but it also requires honesty. And the most honest question you can ask yourself is this: if they never change, if nothing about them evolved, could you live with that? Could you thrive in that? Could you love without losing yourself? Because the harsh truth is, many people stay because they're dating someone's potential while slowly eroding their own. You can waste years chasing someone's growth while abandoning your own. You make excuses for their behavior. You defend them to your friends. You carry the weight of two people's emotional labor because you believe deep down that love means waiting. But there's a difference between loving someone through their process and putting your life on pause while they avoid growth altogether. If you're the only one trying, initiating change, seeking resolution, pushing for depth that's not a relationship, it's emotional charity. When someone shows you who they are today, believe them. Not the version they promised during apologies. Not the one you imagine when you're lonely. Look at their daily behavior, their values, their habits, their energy. That's who they are. That's what you're signing up for. If it's a constant cycle of disappointment followed by empty promises, you're not in a partnership, you're in a pattern. And patterns don't break unless someone chooses to do the work. The danger of falling in love with potential is that it often masks itself as hope. But real love doesn't live in maybe someday. It lives in right now, in the way they treat you on ordinary days, in how they show up without being asked, in how safe, seen, and supported you feel, not in the fantasy of what could be, but in the truth of what is. What if your body has been trying to tell you the truth your heart refuses to hear? What if the tightness in your chest, the constant overthinking, the sinking feeling in your stomach every time they pull away, aren't just passing emotions, but warning signs? The fifth key to saving yourself from wasting years on the wrong person is simple but profound. Real love brings peace, not anxiety. And yet, so many of us spend years confusing chaos with chemistry, mistaking emotional instability for passion, and calling anxiety butterflies, when it's really just our nervous system begging for safety. Here's the hook: love that keeps you in emotional limbo isn't love, it's uncertainty dressed up as devotion, and that uncertainty is what keeps you stuck. You're not addicted to the person, you're addicted to the hope that maybe one day they'll finally show up for you the way you've shown up for them. But love shouldn't feel like waiting. It shouldn't feel like chasing. It shouldn't feel like your heart is constantly walking on a tightrope, afraid that one wrong move will push them away. If you spend more time analyzing their moods than enjoying the relationship, that's not love. It's emotional exhaustion. You don't realize how draining it is until you finally experience something different. When you're constantly questioning if you're enough, wondering why they're suddenly distant, rereading messages to find hidden meaning, you're not building a relationship, you're solving a puzzle. And real love is not a puzzle. It's not about decoding signals, anticipating withdrawal, or trying to be better. So they'll treat you right. It's about ease, not tension. It's about being able to exhale, not hold your breath. You might think your anxiety is coming from within, that maybe you are the problem. But anxiety in love often comes from inconsistent behavior, when their actions don't match their words, when their affection has conditions, when you're never quite sure if today will be a good day or one where you're blamed, ignored, or emotionally starved. And instead of questioning the relationship, you begin to question yourself. Ask yourself this: when was the last time you felt truly calm around them? Not temporarily relieved after a fight, not high after a rare compliment, but truly calm, grounded, and safe. If the answer doesn't come easily, that's not a relationship built on love. It's one built on survival. You've trained your body to adapt to chaos, to normalize unpredictability, to celebrate crumbs of affection like they're a feast. That's not your fault, but it is your responsibility to notice. Love that feels like peace doesn't mean it's always perfect, but it means you don't fear expressing your needs. You don't walk on eggshells. You don't have to rehearse your feelings before sharing them. The right love welcomes your emotions instead of weaponizing them. It invites openness instead of punishing vulnerability. And most of all, it makes your soul rest, not run. What if the very thing keeping you tied to someone isn't love, but fear? Fear of being alone, fear of starting over, fear of not finding better. What if the reason you stay isn't because they make you happy, but because the thought of leaving terrifies you even more? The sixth key to saving yourself from wasting 10 years on the wrong person is this: you must learn to be okay alone, so you don't settle just to avoid loneliness. Because when you're afraid to be by yourself, you'll tolerate almost anything from someone else. You'll call chaos passion, and neglect independence, and disrespect just their way of loving. Here's the hook: you don't really know your standards until you're willing to enforce them, even if it means being alone. Most people don't settle because they don't know better. They settle because they're scared. Scared of the silence, scared of the void, scared of sitting with themselves and confronting the truth. That maybe they've built their life around someone who was never truly right for them. That maybe, just maybe, they've confused company with connection, comfort with compatibility. There's this lie society sells you, that being in a relationship, any relationship, is better than being single. That your worth is proven through your ability to be loved by someone else. So instead of asking, is this relationship actually fulfilling me, you start asking, what if no one else ever loves me again? And that question becomes a prison. It locks you into situations that steal your joy, dim your light, and drain your spirit, all because the idea of being alone feels worse than the reality of staying. But being alone isn't the enemy, loneliness is. And those two things are not the same. Being alone is a state of presence with yourself. Loneliness is the absence of connection, even when you're lying next to someone every night. How many people are in relationships but still feel deeply alone? How many are surrounded by someone's body but starving for their heart? You deserve more than proximity. You deserve partnership. But to receive it, you have to believe that your solitude is sacred, not something to be feared, but something to be honored. When you learn to be alone, you stop begging for breadcrumbs. You stop negotiating your worth just to be chosen. You stop confusing love with validation. You begin to realize that the time you spend with yourself isn't empty, it's preparation. It's healing, it's strength building. Because when you're no longer afraid of being by yourself, you become far more selective about who you allow into your world. You stop entertaining people who can't meet you in depth. You stop compromising on core needs just for temporary companionship. Ask yourself this: if no one was watching, if there was no pressure, no shame, no clock ticking on your age or timeline, would you still choose the person you're with? Or are you staying because the silence of being alone feels louder than the arguments, the distance, or the lack of emotional intimacy? Most people don't need another person. They need to meet themselves. They need to become so whole on their own that love becomes a choice, not a necessity for survival.